Hello guys, in this video I'm going to be explaining callback functions in JavaScript. According to developermozilla.org, a callback function is a function passed into another function as an argument which is then invoked by the outer function. Now, to simplify the explanation of callbacks, we are going to start off by defining and calling a normal JavaScript function that accepts arguments. And I'm going to be making use of Visual Studio Code as my code editor. Of course, you can make use of any other code editor that you're comfortable with. I'm going to start off by creating a simple JavaScript file. I'll name this callback.js. Now, we're going to be defining the function to call it simple function. And this function is going to accept two arguments. Now, what this simple function is going to be doing is going to console log the sum of the two values we pass. So definitely it's going to be two numbers we're going to pass into this function. Now we're going to call this function as it is with two arguments, let's say 4 and 5. Now to run this code, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to make use of Google Chrome's developer tools to run this code. To open the developer tools, you can just come over in your Google Chrome and click on More Tools and click on Developer Tools. Going to be open up. Now we are going to click on the console tab to open up the console, and we are simply going to be pasting the code we copied earlier. And to run the code, we are simply going to press enter. Now this is a simple function that accepted two arguments and console logged the sum of the two arguments. 4 plus 5 is 9. Now going further into callback function, we are going to head back to Visual Studio Code first. Visual Studio Code first. Now we are going to define a function called this outer function. Now this function, now earlier in the definition we said a callback function is a function passed into another function as an argument. Now in this first function we wrote, the simple function we wrote, we passed in two arguments which happen to be values, which happen to be numbers, two numbers, and it consoles numbers. Now in this function we're going to pass a function into this function instead of arguments. We're going to call this callback. Now of course you can call this anything. In fact, you can call it A, you can call it B, you can call this function whatever you like, just using this for easy understanding. Now what this function is simply going to do is going to invoke whatever function we pass into it. That is the only duty of this function, to invoke this function that we passed into it. Now for the function we're going to pass into this function, we're going to be calling this function function. Let's call this function test. Now this function is not going to accept anything. The only thing this function is going to do is going to be alerting on the browser. This is a callback function. Now we are going to invoke this outer function now and pass into it this function that we created, test. Now we are going to copy from line 7, from here to line 7. Copy this. Now we're going to head back to Google Chrome. I'm just going to leave this here. And now we're going to paste in that code. Now to run this code, just going to press enter, and you can see we have this is a callback function. Do I have a typo? Now to recap, earlier we defined a function which accepted two values. Now we said a callback function is a function passed into another function, just like we passed two values here. Now in this function, rather than passing two values, we're going to pass in a function and pass into a function which is then going to be invoked by the outer function. Now this is the outer function here because it's the function that is the out that encapsulates this function we pass into here, right? Okay guys, since the beginning of this video we've been talking about callback functions, but we failed to address why we need callback functions in the first place. Now there are some cases, scenarios when a certain piece of code should run after a particular event has occurred. For example, after a click occurs in the browser, after you click on a particular button or click on a particular interface, you want a particular event to occur, or after you make a request to a particular server or backend to an API, you want something to occur, or you want to make use of the data that is returned back from the request. Now, this is where callback functions are very, very important. Now, to explain further, we're going to be heading back to Visual Studio Code. Now, what I intend to do is to create an HTML file, put in a button in the HTML file, and whenever I click on the button, an event should occur. That is where callback functions really shine. Now, what I'm going to do is to create an index.html file. Sorry, index.html file. Then also create index.js file. This is where the JavaScript code will go. Now in the index.js we are going to generate the boilerplate for HTML. Then we create a script tag where we are going to link the index file which we created here. Now what I'm going to do is create a simple button, give it a class of btn. Here we just put click me. Now this is the basic HTML structure of the button we want to create that will run in the browser. Now in the index file, we're going to create a constant, call it button. Now we're going to go to say document. We're going to select the button from the DOM query selector. Right now, I think we named it, gave it a class of btn. Now what we want to do is to attach an event listener that whenever we click on the button, we want to alert on the screen something. Now what we'll do is we create a function and term it function, call it btn clicked. That sounds appropriate. Simple function. What this function is simply going to do is alert on the screen. Button clicked. Sorry, no, I keep doing that. Now what we are going to do is we want, after an event, that is after a click event occur, we want to pass in a callback function here, and the function we're going to pass in here is going to be this btn clicked. We're going to pass it in here. Now what happens is after a click event occurs, this function, this method here is going to call this function here, which is btn click. Now what we're simply going to do is to load this on the browser. We are going to we're just simply going to click on the button. Now you see this response. This response after the button has been clicked. Now to recap, what happened is that we created a function, this function which is passed into this function created. Actually, in this add event listener here, over here, somewhere in this function, it calls this function right here. Just like over here, we created a function here. This is just like the callback add event listener here. Somewhere in that add event listener, the function that is passed in here is going to be called, and it's only going to be called after this event has been executed, after this event occurs. Now, the same thing goes to when you're making a request of fetching data from a particular API. After the API must have completed, because that is an asynchronous process, asynchronous code in JavaScript. After that request has been completed, then we want to, in this function now, this function is going to be called after the event has occurred, probably with the data which was returned from the API. Now, in JavaScript, there are sometimes there's a term we call anonymous function. That's a function which has no name, an anonymous function. Now, sometimes instead of creating a function and passing that function into this callback function, sometimes what is done is just cut this. We simply create a function right here. Simply create a function right here, and simply this function does the same thing. This is basically the same thing as what we had earlier, but instead we pass the function directly into this event listener, and this function is what we call an anonymous function, doesn't have a name. Now, if we still run this on the browser again, okay, we need to save this first, I think. Now, if we run this on the browser again, simply refresh this, click it. The same thing happens as what we had earlier. Now we had btn clicked. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. That's all about callback functions. You can leave comments if you have questions in the comment section, and don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to get notifications whenever we post new videos. Thanks for watching.